Okay, let's take 10 minutes to go over the black chorus in depth. So we have the input gain. Unity gain seems to be around 47. And if we turn this up, we will add very, very subtle saturation. So I have some sine waves here as soon as I turn them on. And I'm going to put this all the way up. And we can see some very subtle harmonics here. So this thing is extraordinarily light on saturation. It's not something that you can really use as a distortion unit. It's just kind of like a flavor factor. And in fact, this unit does seem to color the input signal anyway. So having all of this kind of vintage vibe gives this pedal a unique feel. So we have three different modes here. We have chorus, pitch modulation, and flanger. Depending on which mode you're in is going to change the function of this depth parameter. This is also, by the way, mislabeled. It will be called intensity in the next update. And also on the pedal itself, this parameter is called intensity. So let's start off with chorus. And I'll switch to some sawtooth waveforms so you can see this a little bit better. With depth down, we are essentially listening to the dry sound. But if we put depth up and width up, because we need to modulate the delay line in order to cause pitch shifting, with intensity up or depth up, we hear a chorused sound, as you would expect. And we could also slow it down. Take down the width. So that's chorus as you would expect it. And the depth knob in this case is almost acting as a kind of dry wet. So you can see the modulated delay line going back and forth here between the main harmonic. By taking depth down, we're turning down the sound of the delay line itself. We can't turn it off, but we can turn it down. So with this all the way up, it functions very similarly to dry wet. You can see that I'm turning down the just the delay portion. I turn that up again, and with this control, do the same thing. I'm turning down the modulated part. Now with the next mode, pitch mod, we're doing the opposite. Right now with depth all the way up, we are only hearing the modulated delay line without the original dry signal. But if I turn depth down, it'll blend in the original signal again and it'll sound like a chorus instead of like a vibrato. So again, with this all the way up, it is kind of like having a dry wet control. By turning this wet control down, I'll reintroduce the fundamental. And you know what I mean, not necessarily the fundamental. I'm talking about the original dry signal, the partial between the modulated delay line. And this modulation with full intensity is only about 50 cents. And in order to show that, I have an LFO patched into pitch, just LFO1, and that is enabled from JS+Y with an intensity of 50 cents. So let's compare the way that sounds to the pitch modulation. Here's the pedal by itself. Then I'll bypass that and use my LFO instead. Again, comparing. Seems to be pretty exact. And the last mode here is the flange mode. And I guess I could use noise for this. Noise seems to be the most apparent. And I'll turn this way down. And the depth control now is acting as a feedback parameter. And we would hear it if I turned on the pedal. And of course we could change the amount of modulation to have it be very, very small. Let's speed it up a bit. And if you want to hear that on an actual waveform, and Flange, by the way, does, if I turn this all the way down, you do hear the original sound as well as the modulated delay line. So we can see what that looks like. Yep, there's the original, and there's our modulated delay line to the left and right of those partials. So Flange in this mode with feedback all the way down is just like having pitch mod, which by the way will sound a little bit louder, with the depth all the way down, which is also just like chorus with the depth all the way up. So 3 different modes all kind of doing the same thing. The last thing I want to talk about is the output mode with between mono versus stereo. And let's use an oscilloscope for this. And let's actually turn down the width. All that the output mode, by switching it to stereo, does is it phase flips the right channel. I can do that live. So you can see we have an exact mirroring. In fact, it's so exact that if we were to downmix to mono, we get almost a perfect phase cancellation. I think that's pretty much everything. Well, I guess the last thing to talk about, actually, is if you are in chorus mode, the phase flip will also blend in the dry signal into both channels. So it's only phase flipping the delayed affected sound, if that makes sense. So we get almost kind of like a square wave type waveform because we're blending a saw up with a saw down with a bit of phase shift because there's some delay there. So that is absolutely everything there is to know about Black Chorus and how it functions. And yeah,